Better Days for Lesbos, a story that explores the ethical boundaries of photojournalism.
In early September 2015, an image changed the perception that the world had of the drama of refugees from the civil war in Syria. The Turkish photographer Nilüfer Demer found herself facing the body of a dead boy floating near the tourist beach of Bodrum. As police removed the body, the photographer took several shots, coldly showing the bearer of an improper, unjust, and unbearable death. We're used to the constant trivialization of death and extreme pain by the fiction industry. But it is a consensual violence, accepted and conventional, while the body of a dead child lying on the ground is beyond acceptable convention. It is, in other words, a violent violence, which as a symbolic boundary of what would be accepted as understandable, has made many people wonder how this could possibly have reached this point. One of the many people in which this image aroused an inevitable feeling of empathy was German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who a few days later declared that Germany was prepared to welcome as many refugees as wanted to live there. That decision involuntarily provoked a beckoning effect. And in the months that followed, 800,000 people, piled by the mafia into overloaded boats, crossed the few kilometers from the Turkish coast to the nearest Greek islands. Many of them negotiated the channel separating a valley from Lesbos. 4,000 drowned. Little alien Cardi was one among the many who lost their lives at sea. But the extreme solitude of the boy lying on the sand had already gained a life of its own.
Mytilene Airport, Lesbos, 14th January 2016.
Uxval ran his hand over his shaved head, did up his navy blue leather jacket, and crossed the arrivals and departures lounge. His dark eyes checked out the premises and straightaway spotted a slim man with a trimmed beard and a pink scarf, who was giving him a welcoming smile. It was Stavros. Stavros drove along the narrow road, the sea on his right, with little coves dotted with the odd boat or two, and a wall of tamarinds on the left that brightened up the dry landscape. In the background loomed Mytilene.
Lesbos is a small place, Uxval. It only takes 3 hours to get to the other side. Lots of boats are coming these days. The Turks are making the most of August.
They're taking advantage of the situation. Some people are like vultures. They tell me you've been living here for some years.
Yes, quite a few years, although intermittently. In fact, my father was born here before he emigrated to the United States. He was the son of Greeks from Smyrna, who were the subject of a population exchange after the 1922 war. I have family here, in Skala Sekamenia.
We're all sons of immigrants. I like your photos, Stavros. You were in the right place at the right time.
Thanks. I like your work too. Anything to do with Iraq and Syria, the Kobani helicopter. You capture important things, and I like the lyricism that underlies your images. They go beyond horror and violence. How old are you?
40.
30 years younger than me. If only I had the chance to start again, you know? The future is yours.
They drove around the port of Mytilene without getting out of the car. The church emerged from the water, overlooking the port, which was a collection of bars and restaurants. Groups of men and women were lying on the benches sheltered by the railings of the walkway. You could see tents set up everywhere, many people sleeping on the ground. Quite different from a normal January. This was January 2016. They drove up to the Memorial Registration Center. Photojournalists from the Magnum agency. They were accredited with the relevant documents and they went inside the overcrowded center.
Scala Sycamania, the arrivals.
Stavros brought the newcomer up to date with the situation.
Between 15 and 20 boats arrive every day. The arrangement is always the same. The men around the sides and the women and children in the middle. Once they've paid, some complain, and whether they like it or not, the mafia pigs force them to get on board, often at gunpoint. We've heard shots from the other side.
What bastards.
The village of Scala Sycamania was amazingly beautiful. A little Greek village preserved in its purest essence, a plum of fishing ports. A white chapel and an open dockyard flanked the way out of the bay. Boats moored up in rows, a wide and accessible dock, a handful of bars and tourist establishments with discreet architecture. There was considerable activity on the quay. Uxbal took discreet shots. Stavros talked to a few fishermen he knew. After a while, he came back with some news.
They say that another one is arriving, but it's drifting. The rescue team is just going out on the jet skis. There isn't much light, but it could be interesting. Let's go, Uxbal.
They got in the car and headed up to the place where the rescue team would lead the boat. When they arrived, there were lots of people waiting, volunteers and photographers. After a tense wait, the boat docked in the safest place. One of the lifeguards, who appeared to be in charge, said,
It was nothing. The engine had stalled. They were very anxious, but we approached them slowly, calmed them down and led them here. Luckily, the sea is very calm.
Stavros took the opportunity to make introductions.
This is Uxbal Gomez from Magnum. He's just arrived for a few days. And this is Oscar Camps from Barcelona.
They shook hands.
We created an NGO and we've been here since September. You work for Magnum?
Well, I work with them, and I'm a partner. We don't need to look for work. It comes to us.
That's what I admire about the Americans, employing the best on merit.
And he is one of the best.
We, on the other hand, wrote to all the Greek, European and international institutions to see if we could help them, and we didn't get a single reply. So we just came along, and within hours we were in the water. Well, please excuse me, I need a hot shower. We cover 17 kilometers of coastline and we're on call all the time. I'm sure we'll meet up in the Tokima bar.
It'd be a real pleasure.
In a few moments, they were sitting at a table among the volunteers and fishermen who were listening to the story of some refugee. Stavros ordered moussaka for both of them. After a while, they were approached by a young man with a short beard and blue eyes. He ordered a beer, sat down with them, and introduced himself.
Hello, do you mind? They've told me you're also photographers. My name is Miltos Dimas. I'm from the Athens APF.
Miltos was speaking.
I don't know what to think about the volunteers. Some are professionals, and those connected to the NGOs are very helpful, but there are also the crazies who have no respect for the local population. Last week, one of them tried to attack me. I shouted at him, "Are you mad or what? If you are here, it's thanks to our photos." I don't know if he understood me, but he shut up.
We aim to capture situations that we can all relate to. We're interested in positive moments which human beings share. We can't save the world, but we can contribute to the dialogue.
Some images have changed the world.
Yes, like that one taken by Nick Oot. The war in Vietnam ended thanks to that photo. The same Nick Oot took the girl to the hospital after he took the photo. Now everyone thinks of that image when they hear the word napalm.
Some images have become icons and changed the world. The Falling Soldier by Robert Capa focuses on the drama of the Spanish Civil War. The one that Kevin Carter took of the Sudanese child beside a vulture portrays the hunger in Africa.
We shouldn't delude ourselves, otherwise we'd make fools of ourselves. A photo that can change the world. That hardly ever happens, although that's what we aim to do day after day. It's our duty to make sure that what's happening isn't forgotten.
Second day in Scala. Let's see if we're lucky today.
An easterly wind was blowing that didn't bode well. Today many more will come. The mafia are having sale. It will be a busy day, Stavros observed. Uxval avidly took photos all day, without a break. Men and women who had fallen into water and were rescued by the Open Arm volunteers. An inflatable boat that capsized against the cliffs. People who landed trembling, soaking wet, shocked and amazed to have survived first the war and then the crossing. If we had known it would be like this, we wouldn't have come, said a man hugging his wife and 2 daughters. Almost everyone used mobile phones to give people the good news that they were safe and sound. Some to unlock passwords that would allow the mafia gangs to collect the agreed amount of money. Uxval was used to all this. He needed more. At noon, the sea was getting worse. Several boats were having problems. One with a stalled engine, one full of water and about to sink, far away from the coast. The jet skis rode up and down the coast furiously. But that wasn't enough for Uxval.
We have to go out in a boat. I've got to get close-ups.
It's dangerous. The problem is that nobody will want to take us.
We could go in your boat. Come on, don't tell me that you're scared. Not the great Stavros Faranduri.
A picture is not worth a life. But the world has to know what's going on. Okay, we'll give it a go. Let no one say we didn't try.
They went down to the dock and got on Stavros's boat. He started the engine, and with a quick maneuver, he sailed out of the port. The boat leapt like a runaway horse. After a minute of riding waves, they were approaching the inflatable boat that was about to sink. Uxval was right. Nobody had ever taken those pictures before. They sailed around the boat in a circle, holding the rudder firmly. Uxval shot photo after photo in a frenzy. The refugees were terrified, and Stavros had no camera to separate him from that terrible reality. He could see the naked truth. And the eye contact was overwhelming. "Get closer," Uxval kept saying to him. He did it, mechanically, without thinking. And then a man stood up and fell into the water. In 6 seconds, the sea had swallowed him up. A woman moved to the space he had left on the edge, holding a child with both hands and gesturing to Stavros to come and take him. Her eyes made contact with the old photographer, who couldn't bear it any longer. So he turned the boat around and went back towards the port. Two boats were approaching with the rescue team. Uxbal, hunched over in the bottom of the boat, was checking his pictures. Once they reached the shelter of Tocaima, they had a few brandies each. And Uxbal started explaining his reasoning.
They're statistics, numbers. What does one more death matter? Or 10? No one claims the missing people. If the statistics say that 70 children have died, you can assume it was 140. Remember what the guy from Barcelona told us, how that image of the child, Elan, is what made them go to Lesbos. And how many lives have they not managed to save up to now? Don't say that an image isn't worth a life. You're wrong.
Stavros, feeling overwhelmed, sat there listening in silence, with the look of that mother engraved on his brain like an iron brand. He didn't want to hear any more. "Good night," he said. And when he was alone, he burst into tears. In the room next door, Uxbal tried to sleep. His arguments were unquestionably rational. He went through the shots of the day. There had been some good ones, and the odd exceptional one, it had been worth risking 2 lives and ignoring the poor refugees who were waiting, trembling, for a rescue that didn't happen, while he had taken photos, as was his duty. He smiled. It wasn't that serious. It wasn't his first time, and it wouldn't be his last. When the helicopter that was evacuating injured civilians, fleeing from ISIS, was shot down in Kobane, he had also made a questionable decision. He managed to persuade the pilot to reenact a simulation of the scene, delaying that flight to the hospital for what would be his most famous video. "Damn it," he said. "The world had to know. The photo that Robert Capa took of the fallen soldier who died at Cerro Muriano was also a montage." And he went to sleep.
Molivos, the kiss of death.
The next day, they went down to have breakfast to Tocaima. The port was reliving the tragedy. Some men were talking hurriedly. Stavros reported.
A large fishing boat set sail last night from Ivalik with a hull packed full of refugees. But the engine stopped and it's been drifting near Molivos. When it was spotted and the rescuers were arriving, part of the deck, filling with water, fell on those who were piled up inside the hull. There are many dead, many of them children. They've asked for volunteers to go in their boats.
Let's go, Stavros.
Yeah, let's go.
They boarded Hotel Gorgona's fishing boat. A volunteer joined them who said he was from the Bolivarian brigades, or who knows where.
Do you know how to swim, son?
"No," he replied.
Oh, well, that makes 2 of us.
"Right, here we go," shouted the son from Hotel Gorgona, starting the engine and steering out of the port. The site of the tragedy was a couple of miles from Skala Sikamenia, following the coastline towards Molivos. When they arrived, the scene was dantesque. The fishing boat was already secured, and crowds of men were towing it towards the coast, laden with corpses, which the rescuers and volunteers started to cover up. Many life jackets were floating in the sea. The problem was how to get on board the boats. It was too difficult for the jet skis, and every minute someone was throwing himself or herself overboard in the hope that they would be saved. Believing in the efficacy of the life jackets, which were in fact useless. They got as close as possible. Stavros and the boy from the hotel were throwing life-saving rings and ropes to those who were closest to pull them on board with their arms, while the guy from the brigades took charge of the rudder. They had got one man on board, and the boy from the hotel was trying to revive him.
The world has to know what's going on. The world has to know.
Uxval was taking the best photos of his life, when suddenly Stavros was trying by himself to pull out a boy who was a dead weight. The old photographer tried to get up to give himself more leverage. He wobbled a few seconds against the railing of the boat, flapping like a great seagull, until he lost his balance and fell precipitously into the sea. He surfaced for a moment and then sank again. The boy from the hotel saw it happening and called out to Uxval.
Stavros has fallen in the water. He's drowning!
The boy dived into the sea. He caught Stavros' body, which was floating half underwater, under the arms and pulled him out. When he surfaced, he looked for the boat and saw that there was nobody to throw them a line or a life-saving ring. The boat was far away, and it was awkward holding Stavros' body. The boy did what he could while shouting desperately. Finally, the boat started getting closer. Uxval appeared over the side with a rubber life-saving ring, which he threw at them when they were near enough. They started reeling in the cable to bring the life-saving ring closer, and between the volunteer and Uxval, they managed to get them out of the water. First, they hoisted up Stavros, and then the young Greek. They tried to revive Stavros, but they got no response. Like other times in his life, Uxval saw that death was raising its head and there was no way out. His instinct had led him to do the right thing, but he had taken too long to listen to it. If he hadn't taken the last photos, if he hadn't gone to the cabin to put his camera away, if he had saved the shots of the day, but now nobody could bring Stavros back to life. And this time there were witnesses. An indescribable anguish seized his soul. It was the end of his career, he thought. He brusquely pushed aside the boy from Hotel Gorgona and desperately tried to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to Stavros. But it was in vain. The soul had left the body of the old photographer, his eyes staring like two empty moons.